Books teach us, they inspire us, they challenge us, and they expand our horizons. Books contain the best thoughts of the greatest minds in history, but the problem is, there are millions to choose from. So what should you invest your time reading? What should you spend your money on? How do you sort through all the bullshit and find the good shit? You let the superior men do the work. Matt and Jay take the best books, pick the most important points, and distill them down to a concentrated 30-minute podcast. We help you find the books you need to read and why you need to read them. You may even learn something. So take out your coffee, tea, a glass of wine, or a good IPA. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Welcome to the Superior Men Bookcast. And welcome back to the Superior Men Bookcast. Today's episode is going to be on it's episode number 10, and our first nonfiction. But before we get there, I am joined here in the virtual studios by my co-host, Mr. Jathan.
What's up, y'all?
Yo. What up, yo?
All right, what up? Yeah, that kind of language, not so much in 1984.
Yeah. And I don't know why you're talking about 1984. We're going to be talking a lot about 1984 because that is our book for today, published by Mr. George Orwell.
Which apparently, as you will find out, in fact, we'll tell you right now in case you didn't know. Do you know George Orwell? Not George Orwell.
Yeah, that is that's his pen name. His real name is Eric Arthur Blair, which I don't know, fine enough. Also, 1984, published in 1949. So let's get into this book here a little bit. All right. So what this book is about? Again, we said it was published in 1949. It's George Orwell's dystopian vision of what he thought the world would be coming to. So again, written like 35 years.
35 years before.
Well, yeah, 35 years in the future, what he thought could be happening 35 years in the future. So,
and you know, I have to say, you go fast forward all the way to 2020, and man, there's a lot of things that he saw coming that came. And we were talking about it in the kind of in the notes preparing for this. It's like it started out as science fiction because he imagined these screens and this technology that was bounced all over the place, and everyone would get together and have these, you know, controlling technology that would follow them around and get all this information out of it. And now we have all that information. So it was science fiction, and then it was moved from science fiction to just fiction because it wasn't really science fiction anymore because it was all real. And then it's maybe more like prophecy at this point.
Yeah, that's what we're saying. Now I think it's actually more true. It's especially if you look into what's going on in China, which is pretty interesting actually. But you know, so really, what was interesting is what he's setting out to do with this book. So he lived through World War II, and you know, actually saw firsthand, you know, what happened with Stalin and Hitler. And, you know, now we just go, Hitler's a horrible person, but Stalin, I don't know, he's kind of a good dude. Yeah, not so much on that one. But really looking at what a totalitarian regime can do and what it does to its populace.
It's not just like ideas that could happen. He was watching it happen next to him. He was an English writer, and he actually grew up, we'll get to a little bit of his bio later, but he grew up in India, so he spent some time there. He actually spent some time in Spain, and in Spain they had some pretty nasty things going on, very similar to that. I think it's more fascist that they were dealing with. He was in the Spanish Civil War, but he was in the middle of the kind of totalitarian system that he's talking about. So for him, less fiction expanded out into fiction, but in many ways, very much he's describing what he saw firsthand.
Right.
And so he wrote this book to attempt to solve some problems. What are some of the stuff that he was trying to fix or maybe bring light to?
A lot of the evil governments, really, and how government can become this all-encompassing, really evil, really horrible thing. And that's really what he was talking about. And just really talks about what truth actually is. What is that? Is it a thing, or is it subjective, and it just sort of depends? So... and really, he was just afraid of what could potentially come about. Obviously, he didn't understand what all the technology would be, but, that's sort of, the communicator device in there. Why I'm totally blanking on that, Jay.
Like the telescreen?
Yeah, telescreen. Where it's like, it's a two-way television and camera where you can kind of see everything, and there's a lot of truth to that now, but so let's talk about real quick. Just give me a couple of people who are going to benefit from this book here, Jay.
Anyone who watches the news, and I'm going to use the word news in air quotes. It's right. It's news, because really what news is now is it's propaganda, where we have information that we're trying to send. It's anybody who's gonna like a good horror story. If you like Nightmare on Elm Street and Silence of the Lambs and Saw, this'll do you good. There's all kinds of dark shit in here. Who probably won't like 1984? People who believe government is generally good and probably a positive thing. People who get depressed easily. And as Matt, you pointed out, Antifa members.
Yep, they won't like it.
Also,
yeah, not so much.
Also won't like it. Is this book easy, average, or difficult to read?
Very, I don't know. So I think it depends on how deep you want to dive into it. If you're just reading it as a story, you kind of go, it's relatively easy to read, but there's a lot of depth to it. The only thing would be is there's a lot of new words in there with this new speak as part of this, so that can get a little bit challenging. Probably 8 to 10 or so hour reads, 325 pages roughly, 11 and a half, 12 hours for the audio. Rated very high. If you've never heard of this book, I don't. That would be crazy to me, but. If you have not read this book, you need to. It is the standard in which any of these like dystopian novels are judged and what they're based on.
Yeah, any novel now that talks about a totalitarian regime or a system of government, many video games that are out now would qualify for this. All of that stuff goes back to 1984.
Our term Big Brother.
The term Big Brother. In fact, if you've heard the term Orwellian before, and
right.
Of course you have, this book is the reason for that. And it's interesting that we use Orwellian to describe more of a dystopian future, but he's actually written other books that aren't 1984. He's written 9 of them. So that's it's pretty good. Matt, how did you first find out about this book?
It's probably one of those books that I had known about for a long time, and just never really read it, and whatever, it sounds weird, it's old book or whatever, heard about it in school and just never read it. I actually did not read this book until, I don't know, maybe 3 years ago.
Really?
So yeah, and so I don't, it's really hard for me to pinpoint when I heard about it, but yeah, it's just it had come across enough times where I was like, nope, gotta read this. What about you?
Where most people pick it up, assuming that they actually read it in class, and that was in high school.
Okay.
And because that's where, it's taught in most high schools nowadays, and if you don't get it there, you will get it in college, assuming that you read all the books that you're assigned. Now, it is possible to get around that, but it is being assigned every year across the country for sure.
Right, as it should be,
and it should be, because teenagers are about that's the age where you need to start realizing, okay, things are not all sunshine and roses, and I will say it set the fear of God in me.
Right.
when I first started reading. We'll chat a little bit about kind of our individual perspectives about the book later.
Well,
but
so
as we get into,
get us a little bit of a bio of him. A little bit more into it.
Orwell's a real interesting character. I didn't realize how many different, kind of his background was as interesting as it is. He was born in India, 1903, to British parents, raised in England. So he's born in Bengal, India, one of the colonies. Raised in England, spent some time kind of going to different schools, then grew up, returned to India in 1922 to serve as an officer with the Indian Imperial Police in Burma, and rose through the ranks in the Imperial Police. At one point, he was responsible for the security of several 100,000 people at a time. So he was quite good at working with people, understanding people, and kind of working within a system. And spoke fluent Burmese, is 20-some years old, 21 years old, and was known to be speaking with the highest level authorities in the country in fluent Burmese, which is pretty impressive because a lot of English people they thought that was beneath them. He also arguably spoke French, spent several years in Paris, London, began to earn his living writing novels and essays. He became a soldier, as we were referring to earlier, in the Spanish Civil War for the Republican faction, so he saw what it looked like under fire and with the various different government factions vying for control of the country, and the horrors that they would use to be able to dominate their own people and the people next to them. 1941, hired by the BBC for war work, this quote unquote, to create cultural broadcasts for India to counter Nazi propaganda. Nazi propaganda was being spread throughout India to undermine the British imperial presence, the colonies that they had there. So BBC went on had an entire section of the network that was designed to make basically counter propaganda. Traveled extensively throughout India, England, Europe, meeting people in every political and economic status, and seemed to appreciate all of them. Made friends very, very quickly. Just had a way with people. And was able to see things with a very unbiased kind of eye with that, that's what makes a good author. Somebody that can talk to anybody and appreciate them all. Not too many great authors can do, or not too many authors can do that. All the great ones can. And then he has classics, Animal Farm, Burmese Days, a novel based on his experience as a colonial policeman in India. Down and Out in Paris and London, and The Road to the Wigan Pier, studies of poverty firsthand because he was broke for a number of years. His experiences in the Spanish Civil War, homage to Catalonia, and of course 1984. And then he suffered from health problems throughout his life and died at 47 from tuberculosis. So he didn't live a real long time. Matt, let's talk about the book. Give us a breakdown here, what we're looking at for the material and the information in this book.
So what's kind of an interesting
in one
thing,
sentence.
Yeah, right. So it's really interesting. The doublespeak is a huge deal in this book, and doublespeak basically just means you have two diametrically opposed ideas that you will accept as truth at the same time. So you have this doublespeak. You have there's four main ministries or government agencies in this. A Ministry of Peace, which is the War Ministry in Oceania's government, where this is set, in charge of the armed forces, and basically one of their ideas is that you just have perpetual war. Perpetual war makes things an easier population to control. The Ministry of Plenty, which oversees rationing of food and supplies. And basically you hear that no matter what, everything is good. Your society is whatever. It's amazing. However, you have severely rationed food. The Ministry of Truth, which is the Ministry of Propaganda. Um, well, of course, responsible for any falsification of history, because basically then the protagonist, that was part of what his job was, is that you basically just rewrite history. Well, we've changed our new stance, so we're just going to change it. That's it. And also, really, you're deciding what truth is, because truth is what you're told. That's it. You also have the Ministry of Love, which enforces your loyalty to Big Brother, basically through fear and massive social architecture.
I was going to say there's an entire system, a massive system that says that if you say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing or even think, because thought crime, think the wrong thing. In fact, thought crime is really the worst. Then we grab you and maybe you disappear. Maybe we educate you, and that, if necessary, that's the Ministry of Love is also the Ministry of Torture.
Right, exactly, because that's where your re-education happens. So let's get into some questions here. All right, so Jay, what did you like about this book? It just feels so accurate. Like, as you read it, it feels, it's terrifying. It's like one of the scariest novels ever, because most people are not that scared of Freddy Krueger or the Blair Witch or something like that. But when they know there's a serial killer in the movie, they go home after the movie and they're like looking over their shoulder, and any sounds they hear, they're like, he's in the house. I know he's in the fucking house. This book is not like a fictional terror. This is a factual terror. And it feels like everything that he writes about is could be happening at any point. And that, I really liked it, because it feels like he absolutely has his finger on the pulse throughout the entire book of what is actually happening with a society like that. Like, it feels like it's spot on. I can't say, I've never lived in a totalitarian environment, but for what I've read and what I've seen, this feels just accurate, and it's incredible. All right, couple quotes. What do you got?
There's two that I really like. Again, this is one of those books, like so many of our books, pick a page, pick a sentence. That's amazing. Right. But there's some truly classic lines in here. One of them is, powers in tearing human minds to pieces and putting them together again in new shapes of your own choosing. When you can control what's going on in somebody else's mind above and beyond their capacity to argue with you, that's power at its absolute form. Yep. So that's one of them. And then along with that, reality exists in the human mind and nowhere else. So if I can convince you to think something, it's real for you. Yeah,
what is real? I mean,
right.
That's really the point of it there. Great.
If it's real for you, it's real everywhere you go. So, and that just spending some time thinking about that and go, okay, so my reality is different from your reality, different somebody else's reality, and who is trying to shape your reality? The stories that you get, the books that you read, the people that talk to you, what you see on television, what your government and the people around you and the systems around you are trying to convince you of, the religious people around you. If you spend enough time around those people, they will change you. And so it's super important to be aware of everything that goes into your head, because it will change your reality. True story.
Yep, absolutely. No, that's a great point on that. So what did you learn from the book?
It was one of my first real novels. Not, kids' books and Chronicles of the Narnia and various fantasy stories and, Black Beauty and Old Yeller and Little Orphan Annie and just stuff like that, where it didn't have real pain. It didn't have real danger. This book was just overwhelmingly real. And I'm like, there's horrible things happening out there. Horrible things. and and it's so well written and it's so potent that it was hard for me to hard for me to even process it. It was incredible.
Yeah. Well, no, and that's absolutely true, because it almost like it does take a little bit of time to sink in here. Okay, well, then how about a critique of it?
I would say not so much a critique of it, because there's so many valuable things in there that it's not worth my time to look for the flaws. I would say the things that I liked least are the weaknesses that I looked at in myself, my lack of understanding about government, my lack of understanding about kind of fear and control, the part at the end where he's put in the room with the rat, and the question is, what would you do under those circumstances?
Right.
And that's scary, and so I guess those are the things that I liked least, is the stuff that I saw in myself when put up against that.
Sure. No, I get that. Do you have any questions for the author?
I would like to know why he ended it on such a downer.
I felt like I needed a shower after listening to it.
Well, you want to kind of crawl into the corner and just kind of hug yourself and, sip on some hot chocolate or something and be like, it's all right. It's all going to be okay. It's okay. It's just a book. It's just a book.
I know. And what about any related or connected books?
I mean, Animal Farm obviously is
right.
one of them. Everybody should read that one. I would like to read some of his other nonfiction books, and then of course 48 Laws of Power feels like another kind of connected series with this, and maybe kind of breaks down some of the elements that you're seeing applied there on a broader scale. So I would say, if you haven't read 48 Laws of Power at this point, make sure you pull that one out too, because I think it'll help you understand this one. Matt, I'm gonna turn the tables here. Your turn. What did you like best about 1984?
Well, so like I said, I didn't. If I read it as a kid, I don't remember it. So I probably was one of those that maybe it was assigned, and then I was like, yeah, well, whatever. So that's very possible for me. But reading it as an adult, it was very interesting, and so I listened to it, and but really seeing like how prophetic that book was. Granted, I know he was taking back from some of his experiences, especially with the communist Soviet Union and the Nazi regime, and basically how that all worked, which is interesting as well. But it's it's like it got dialed up even from there, and you kind of read this and you go, this occurs. This is not this is not just fiction. So
no, it's really not. It's really not, and scary.
Right.
What? Give me a couple quotes that you really liked.
So many. One of my favorite, because I knew this quote before I knew it went to this book. That's what I'm saying. It was interesting. Is who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past.
Yeah, that's good.
So basically, whoever, if you allow it, whoever you are allowing to be in power, they're the ones who control everything. Because what do you know about history? Were you there 300 years ago? No. So what do you know? How does communist China stay in power? It's just by suppression of their people. So that's
right.
Part of it too.
Right.
Another one that if thought corrupts language, language can also corrupt thought. And that's kind of along the lines of one of your quotes too, Jay. But really, it's like your language what you hear and what you expose yourself to can absolutely control your thoughts.
It can, and how you think about the words that you use and how you use them and how you're taught to use them can absolutely change many things, and it's so powerful because you don't even realize that it's going on.
Yep.
What did you learn from this book?
So really what it did was it re-strengthened my personal belief in a limited government, and how happy I am to live in the Western world where we have quite a few rights. And those of you not in the United States, sorry, We have quite a few here that even you in Canada or Australia or in Europe don't have. So, which is quite refreshing, and it just strengthened my thoughts there.
Okay. So it kind of gives you even more kind of appreciation for what we really have and what, options that we have where so many other people don't have them.
Correct.
Okay. What do you like least?
So for me, and maybe it's just because I was listening to it, I don't know. I just didn't care for there's a love story arc that's in there that I don't know. It didn't seem to do a ton, and it didn't seem to change a lot. I mean, I guess it just progressed the story, but that's about it.
So it's not as romantic as you're hoping for.
No, it just didn't. I don't know. Either it needed to be more developed or left out. I don't know.
Wasn't working for you.
Yeah.
All right. What questions would you ask Mr. Blair?
I would ask if he thought if he actually thought that this kind of future would really be possible, or if he was just sort of like exaggerating to the point of going, oh my goodness, this is a crazy view, and it may ever get here.
Whether or not he really truly was that kind of pessimistic about humanity and what was going to happen.
Yeah. Okay.
That would be a good question, and I think related also to the downer question that I had for him.
Right.
So, that maybe he was that much of a downer. He's like,
well, and I was walking through an airport through Denver. I remember this as I was walking through the Denver airport when that ended, and I was like, I still had time before my flight, and I was like, wow, I got a lot of reflection to do right now when that book ended. So
you're like, am I going to make my flight, or is anyone going to make any of their flights? What does it all mean?
What does it matter? Anyway.
No, this maybe, that could be a good recommendation for other people, but just like maybe have like a Pixar movie or, some cookies or something on hand for when you finish the book. Yeah, you need to have
something afterwards.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yes, you do, for sure.
Do some planning there. And then what about connected related books that you might recommend?
Really, so 48 Laws of Power, of course, Animal Farm, of course. I think those two are easy jumps. Really, to me, those are, if you take 48 Laws of Power to the extreme, this is what you get, is 1984. So I don't know. Really, those two are the only ones that stand out in my head.
Okay. All right. So we got just about a minute left here in the show.
Oh, actually, I would say, in a weird way, the Bill of Rights for the United States, the first 10
articles
to the Constitution.
First 10 of the Constitution. Yeah. You know what? I think that's actually a great idea. So. Final thoughts here.
If you read this book, if you were like me and you didn't really read it or don't remember it as a kid, you owe it to yourself to read it now. If you have never read it, then you also need to read this book. It's phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal and disturbing and frightening and like down to your core, because you go, I could see this happening, wherever you live, and you go, and just doing a little bit of reading about China and their social engineering and their social credit program makes sense.
That is accurate. Gentlemen, thank you very much for listening. The book, once again, 1984 by George Orwell. We'll see you again next time.
A reader lives 1,000 lives before he dies. The man who never reads lives only one. Thank you for listening to the Superior Men Bookcast. Share it with a friend. You heard our thoughts. Go read it for yourself.